You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 126, where I'm going to give you the shorter, straighter route to your teen developing sustainable, successful exam performance. Because if you're tired of your teen having to guess at exactly how marks are allocated, or what the words sustained or discerning actually looks like and means on the success criteria, or what discuss really requires in an essay question, then listen in to discover the number one shortcut to exam success for your teen. Because students shouldn't just have to somehow figure this out and magically up-level these skills each year in order to get the results that they deserve and still keep a sustainable study-life balance along the way. I am fired up for this one. Let's dive in. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hey VIPs, I hope you and your teens are doing great, and I really hope that the term is going super well. I am better than great. I am really pumped up for this episode because this week we are going to get into, this is going to sound very dry, stick with me, direct instruction and explicit teaching versus inquiry learning or discovery learning, which is usually referenced in the world of education in relation to subject content teaching. But I want to talk about it today in terms of the skills of applying that subject content, your teen's subject knowledge, and how they can show they know that subject content when it comes to exams, essays, and assignments. Now, this has been on my mind for a little while, and it's taken me a while to actually do this episode because I've ended up spending a lot more time and doing a lot more research than I thought, because the more I've delved into this, the stronger the message has become, the stronger the evidence has been, and the stronger I have felt about sharing it all. So much so that I have actually created a one-page resource for you that you can download for free, along with the full transcript of this episode in case you prefer to read rather than listen. And you can get both of those at www.rocksolidstudy.com/126. That's the numbers 126. Now, the terms direct instruction and explicit teaching are pretty interchangeable. And in subject content teaching, it means that content, that knowledge is clearly, directly, explicitly taught, shown, and explained. So it means explicitly stating the facts or directly explaining a concept and really just delivering and mapping out how something works. So if we translated that to my focus of training students in the skills of applying that subject knowledge, it would mean that specific concepts and facts and tools and strategies related to applying that subject content to the way that a task or question requires and how the mark scheme demands are directly explained and explicitly taught to students. So these would be facts like how exams work, how they're written, how questions are written, how marks are allocated, how words and descriptors like discerning are actually different to appropriate, for example. It would mean explicitly sharing and teaching and training strategies for dissecting the specific wording of a question or the success criteria and what those words actually mean on the mark scheme, and delivering the tools and techniques to actually be able to then produce what those criteria demand at the level that they demand it, and give your teen the insight and information to not only know what they do demand, but also what they don't, and therefore give them the confidence to leave out what they don't need, rather than having to always try and hedge their bets or put something in just in case. Now, in my quest to explore all of this a little bit more, I ended up coming across a book called The Power of Explicit Teaching and Direct Instruction. Now, it's by a teacher called Greg Ashman. I didn't know anything about this person beforehand, but one of the things that really resonated with me was when he wrote in the introductory chapter of the book, he wrote, "There is this general idea in education today that figuring something out for yourself is superior to having it explained to you." And I completely agree. Not in terms of the statement that figuring something out for yourself is superior, but that this idea really is super prevalent. At least in my experience of my teacher training back in the UK and in all my years of teaching both in the UK and in multiple states in Australia. And I do get it. We do know that rote learning is not the most effective way to learn, and the old ways of chalk and talk style teaching are not the most effective ways to teach or learn. Although, spoiler alert, it turns out that is not entirely the case. Now, you'll see this clearly on the chart from international research that I have included on the resource for this episode, and it shows the actual measured effectiveness of these different types of teaching, and I will get more onto that in a moment. Because the other way of teaching, the more modern and I would say encouraged way of teaching these days, is to create experiences, inquiries, and a pathway of discoveries for students so that they create their own learning by working things out for themselves. And absolutely, this can work. And like I said, I will come to that in a moment. But I would argue, and this is my key point here, that this experiential discovery style of learning is the only way of learning that is provided to most students when it comes to learning exam technique or revision strategies or effective essay writing or any other skills related to assessment. Students certainly are not or are very rarely being taught any of these explicitly or directly in school, in my opinion. And so by default, they're having to inquire or discover, or let's just say it, guess or use trial and error to try and figure all this out. Now, these days, we don't even officially call it trial and error. It's now called guess and check or trial and improvement. So you take a guess and you try it out and then you keep trying to improve until you get closer to the answer. But I don't think there's actually much improvement and learning happening, whether it's trial and error or trial and improvement. And a perfect example of this was when one of my 10WGT students, Alex, said on our consult, he said, "Whenever I would get a good result previously, it would just feel like a fluke. I didn't really know why I'd got it, so I couldn't necessarily do it again on a future test or assignment." So this isn't error, this is actually trial and success. But he would be pleased with the result, but because he wasn't totally sure of how he'd done it and how he'd achieved it, because it was by guessing and hoping rather than with any intentional strategy or confident steps or proven systems, even when he was successful, it wasn't building his skills or confidence. It was just a happy result where the guesswork had actually paid off. So sometimes it's trial and success, sometimes it's trial and error, but for him, it wasn't trial and improvement because he wasn't able to actually take any learning forwards. He couldn't then apply any of that success to a different task. And this is my issue with one of the arguments for discovery learning in this context. It's that we learn from our mistakes or that we fail forwards and that students will have productive failures. And maybe sometimes in a carefully, intentionally crafted lesson to provide an avenue to build subject knowledge, then that happens. But in my experience, when it comes to exams and assessment, when it comes to knowledge application skills, like exam technique, like essay strategy, the failure, if it happens, is not necessarily that productive. Now, there may be some productive learning about the subject content. Let's just say they actually had the wrong information or the wrong answer. But there seems to be very little learning happening for students in terms of the skill and technique aspect from a failure to get a certain grade or pick up certain marks for specific marking descriptors that can actually be taken forwards in a way that can be applied to future exams or assessments. The example I always tend to think of for this is where they get told to add more detail. And really, this brings up the need for training and understanding around adding more detail how. Where exactly? By extending which exact point? And why does that point need more detail, but another one doesn't? Now, again, my personal experience of this was affirmed in the book, The Power of Explicit Teaching, where the author wrote about their observations. And they wrote, students are assigned essays to write. They don't do a great job. And then teachers are staying up to the small hours, explaining in each essay a small sample of the things that are wrong with it. And yes, I have definitely been there, done that, and got that t-shirt. But this was my favorite line. It said, it should occur to us that it may be better to teach students how to do it right in the first place. And I would even suggest that where it says essay, we could substitute in there any type of assessments. So students are assigned exams and don't do a great job, or research assignments, or extended responses, or even revision, but they don't do a great job. Now, that could be not a great job in relation to their result, but I'm also referring to the process. Your teen might end up with a great mark in their assessment, but has it taken them twice as long as it could or should have, or twice the levels of stress to actually complete it? Were they having to cut after going way over the word count? Were they doing 3 or 4 drafts and having to change their point or examples, or even the whole focus of their writing? Were they staying up till the small hours themselves, trying to revise and getting stressed or getting worried? Because what the research shows is that direct instruction and explicit teaching can offer a shorter, straighter route, in my words, a shortcut to developing effective learning in the classroom. And I would therefore suggest that the exact same thing applies to developing effective study techniques, exam technique, and performance, that this is the same. Because ultimately, your teen's subject knowledge that their teachers and the schools are delivering in the classroom, that subject knowledge is being assessed using exams, essays, coursework, assignments. And so your teen could really benefit from, or I would go so far as to say they deserve to be or should be, taught explicitly, directly, how to tackle and perform efficiently and confidently in them. I.e., not just be taught the subject knowledge that they're then expected to show, but also taught and trained directly in the skills of how they're supposed to be showing that knowledge, how to put it across in the way that the task or the exam question demands, and in the way that the mark scheme requires. Now, none of this is to say that we should go back to the days of chalk and talk. I literally remember my biology teacher sitting at the front of the classroom, dictating notes that we wrote frantically into exercise books. And I also remember having an English teacher who wrote so much onto one of those big roller chalkboards that they would go the full way round, as we were also just copying the notes down, that they had to then rub off their own writing from the exact same lesson to keep writing out more. And look, students shouldn't be being spoon-fed everything. But honestly, I think, and there is research to show this, and I will share this with you in a second, that actually some things should be. Your teen should be handed some things on a plate. It's just a much more effective way for them to grasp it and learn it and use it. For example, I think they should be told and trained in how exams are written and worded and marked. Now, the good news is that we don't have to guess at what should and shouldn't be spoon-fed or handed on a plate, because the research that I have been reading shows that the key factor in what type of teaching and learning is most effective, whether it's direct instruction or that inquiry discovery learning, is whether the student is a novice or expert. So if they're a novice, then explicit direct teaching is most effective, which makes sense because it's definitely tougher to try and make discoveries of your own if you don't even know what it is you're really looking at. And then inquiry-based teaching can be more effective for experts. So students who already have an excellent grasp of a subject, but are going to add depth of their understanding or build new examples or additional related concepts to that. And I would argue that unfortunately, most students are not experts at exam technique, writing sophisticated essays or completing assessments smoothly, efficiently, and super effectively. Now, that isn't to say that your teen isn't getting good results, and it's not to say that students aren't out there getting great results, but I do think that many of them are not necessarily tackling them expertly, with confidence, and in the most effective and productive ways. Now, on top of this, There is PISA research, PISA, which is an international research program for high school student assessment that has been running for over 15 years across 72 countries in the more developed world. So in other words, it's a big, well-respected study that has shown that a blend of teacher instruction and inquiry-based learning is the best combo overall for learning subject content. And one of the many things they've produced is this visually really clear, I think, summary of this in a chart. It's almost more like an infographic. And like I said, I've included this in the resource that I've created for you for this episode. Get it at www.rocksolidstudy.com/126. But what really stands out on this chart is not just where the biggest gains in learning are, where there's that combo of teaching styles, but also the fact that wherever there is that direct instruction, there is always a positive impact on learning, shown with the positive blue figure on the chart. Whereas inquiry methods can actually be detrimental to learning. They actually have a negative red figure on the chart if they are not done alongside or preceded by direct instruction. So in other words, this means that trying to do that inquiry-based learning too early before students have become experts, then it can actually be detrimental. And remember, most students are not experts in exam technique or assessment, and yet they are being left to try and figure this stuff out through discovery learning, mainly because they're not being taught it at all. So these poor teens are just discovering their way along because it's the only way available to them. There is no inquiry task or discovery lesson structure that is guiding them through the development of these skills, techniques, and strategies. But from the research, we know anyway that having direct, explicit instruction will be the most effective way when they're not already an expert. And whether or not you or your teen feels that the results, the numbers, and the grades that they get really matter, whether that's for next steps that they want to pursue or just the fact that they want to get a certain grade, I would argue that this matters for pretty much every student, no matter what. Because if you'd love for them to have a less stressful, more confident, more successful, more enjoyable experience at school and college, then knowing what you're doing, knowing how to do it, and executing it well is really going to boost their self-belief and pride. And guesswork and poor results do the opposite of that. They dent confidence, and over time, I've seen it reduce students' motivation and their self-belief and aspiration. So if you would like direct expert instruction and explicit training of exam technique, assignment strategies, understanding and predicting mark schemes, essay structuring, how to dissect any question, how to actually analyze instead of just explaining, how to know how much detail is required and how to give it, then definitely go look at the list of contents of the 10-week Grade Transformation Program. It's on the summary page. It's about halfway down the page. There is a list of everything that we cover. You can find it at www.gradetransformation.com/join to maybe see if this will be helpful for your teen. And if it is, I would love to have them join us. Now, if you're listening to this as this episode drops, then I'm going to be opening a very special limited edition, if you like, version of the 10WGT, where students can get the direct instruction and explicit training in the program, but also have me accompany it with them for expert personal one-to-one instruction, feedback, coaching, and support until their end of year exams. So this is especially for those students in their final exam year, where all of this is not just important, but also maybe a little bit urgent, and some real focused personal training would really be helpful. Now, I'm going to send out this information only to my email list. It's not going to be on socials. It's not going to be on the public website. So if you're not on my email list and you would like to be, then just email support@rocksolidstudy.com and just ask to be added and we'll pop you on. Because I'll also be emailing out some bonus content about these issues. So it will be helpful no matter what year group of high school your teen is in to get some of that input. So to sum up, I want to eliminate actually the guessing, the trial and erroring of your teen trying to figure out what exam questions want, how to put their knowledge across in order to get the results that they're capable of. And I believe that if we are assessing students using exams, essays, and assignments, then we should be directly teaching them the skills, the strategies, the concepts, the information that they need in order to tackle them effectively, understand how they work, and perform in them successfully. So grab that one-page resource, check out the 10-week program, make sure you're looking out for my emails with more information and a special limited edition of the 10-week program. And I will meet you back here next week, and I'll see you then. Take care. Bye. If you're ready to have your teen achieve their best possible results with less stress, then I want to invite you to enroll them in the 10-week Grade Transformation Program, where they're going to learn the key concepts, skills, and strategies to catapult their performance in assessments and exams. It's risk-free. They either achieve bigger and better results with a whole lot more confidence in 10 weeks, or we refund you in full. Just head over to www.rocksolidstudy.com/program, and I'll see you there.